welcome to Razz Reviews. Today I'm going to be reviewing Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. Fantastic Beasts is a prequel that's set in the wizarding world of Harry Potter, and it takes place in 1926, which is 70 years before the first Harry Potter movie. The story follows Newt Scamander, who's a wizard that travels to New York City with a suitcase full of an array of magical creatures that are set loose in the city. I'm personally not a big fan of Harry Potter. I never read the books, and I only watched the movies after the Deathly Hallows came out. However, I loved those movies, and I definitely enjoyed this one as well. It's not perfect, it definitely had some flaws, but I really had fun with it. Now I'm going to count down the top 3 things that I liked about Fantastic Beasts. Number 3, it's a standalone story. So in this day and age, we are getting a lot of prequels and a lot of sequels and a lot of spin-offs to a lot of things that we liked as kids. And I feel like a lot of those films rely heavily on the nostalgia factor, and they seem to be more of an homage to previous films rather than being a standalone story on their own. However, Fantastic Beasts does not fall into this trap, which I found really refreshing. Even though we are aware that it takes place in the same world as Harry Potter, and there are certain Easter eggs to those movies, but that wasn't the main drive behind the film. The film had its own story, its own characters, its own premise, and I thought it was really well contained within itself, and I really enjoyed that aspect. And the film still had Easter eggs, and it really still felt like it took place in the world of Harry Potter. However, it did not rely way too much on nostalgia like certain films. Remember Tatooine? Remember? I remember. I really liked Newt Scamander as a main character. I thought he was well established, and I thought he was quite adorable. He had really nice quirks and mannerisms of his own. He seemed a little awkward, yet he had a big heart, and you can really see that in his relationship with the magical creatures. You can feel his love for them, and you can also feel his fear for their safety, and that made him really likable and really lovable for me. The number 2 thing I liked was the beasts. So the movie is Fantastic Beasts. If the beasts aren't fantastic, then the movie wouldn't really work, now would it? And of course, the beasts in this film are a definite highlight. I thought their designs were really cool, they were very creative. Some of them were lovable and cute, and others were scary and intimidating, and I really enjoyed all of the scenes that included the beasts in them. My favorite beast would definitely have to be the Niffler. I thought he was adorable. I loved it. I want one. I want one for Christmas or a birthday, and I don't care if it steals all my shiny things. I really, really want one. Hint, hint. So getting introduced to all these creatures and all their different abilities and habits, I thought made the film a lot more interesting than it could have been, and it made the film, for lack of a better term, more magical. And I really enjoyed all of those scenes, and I thought that the beasts were super cool and super lovable and definitely worked in the film. The number 1 thing I liked about Fantastic Beasts is Jacob Kowalski. Dan Fogler did an amazing job at playing this character. I thought he made him very lovable, likable, and of course, very relatable to us. So Jacob is basically a nomad, or the film's equivalent of a muggle, and he's, of course, the audience's eyes and experience into the magical world. He sees things, and thus we see things through him. And this character, if he doesn't work, then your own portal to the film does not work. And here, he worked very well. He's this adorable baker, and he seems to have a lot of heart, and he's not very bright, but at the same time he wasn't too stupid or too annoying. He was also the comic relief in the story, and sometimes that can get on your nerves if it doesn't work, but it definitely worked here. I thought he was hilarious. I laughed a lot, and I enjoyed his scenes, and I felt like he brought a lot of heart to the film, and he was also the emotional anchor for the group of characters, which was really important. And I liked him and rooted for him and wanted him to be okay all the time, and that is really important because it lets you connect with the film and be invested in the character story. And I was definitely invested in the lovable baker. I loved it. And now time for the top 3 things that I didn't like about Fantastic Beasts. Number 3, an inconsistent tone. This film was directed by David Yates, who was at the helm for the latter Harry Potter films, and he brought this really nice dark tone to those films, and that tone was definitely here in the film. I never felt like this was not a Harry Potter film, but sometimes the film tended to steer into children territory a little bit, and it was a little jarring because it felt it contrasted way too much with the dark adult theme. Now, for a lot of people, when they watched the first couple of Harry Potter films, they were watching children grow up and they were growing up with them. However, here it's very different. We're adults, most of us, and we are watching adults. So our relationship with the characters and with the tone of the story is pretty more complex and more adult than it was when we were watching children. However, there were scenes in the film that were a little too silly and a little too kiddish, and things got a little too clownish for my taste, and it disrupted the flow of the film for me sometimes. The number 2 thing I didn't like about the film was the romance. I was never a big fan of any of the romance that happens in the Harry Potter films. I never got the whole Hermione-Ron thing. I never got any of Harry Potter's relationship. I felt that him and Hermione would have made more sense, and the romance did not work here for me either. I mean, they tried to establish certain emotional connections between characters, and I felt that the connection between Newt Scamander and Jacob worked very well. However, the connection between the men and the women did not really hit the mark. I felt like there were certain romantic developments that should have happened in latter films rather than happen in this particular one. I felt when they happened here, they were a little rushed for me and it didn't really work and it felt really forced. The number one thing I didn't like about Fantastic Beasts was pacing issues. So J.K. Rowling was sitting at home one day and she was like, I would really like to make a few more $1 million. I don't think it would hurt. And thus we have Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. Now this film existed as a book that was only in the Harry Potter world, and now it's a story. J.K. Rowling wrote the script herself here, and it's pretty evident that she's not an experienced scriptwriter because she fell into one of the most common pitfalls: pacing. What scenes should be short, what scenes should be long, what scenes should be cut out, what should be included. A lot of times the film's pacing went up and down and it felt too rushed at certain places and felt too slow at a lot of places. There were also a bunch of scenes that I felt were repetitive and unnecessary. You'd have two characters interact with each other. I want this thing, where is this thing? And then it ends. And then the scene would happen again where the same two characters would meet and they would talk. And I want this thing, where is this thing? Did you find the thing? And it kept repeating and repeating and repeating, and the scenes never had a different resolution. So it slowed the film down for me way too much, and I felt that hurt the film the most. Also, the pacing issue was the most noticeable in the film's ending. This film took forever to end. It really reminded me of Lord of the Rings, the return of yet another final scene, because like that movie, you'd have characters interact with each other, you'd have an emotional resolution, and then the music would swell up and the crescendo would happen and it would fade to black. And you'd be like, ah, that was lovely. And then another scene would come and the characters would interact and it would be emotional, and then the crescendo would happen and the music would increase and it would fade to black. And then another scene would start. It was never ending. I felt that the film overestimated my relationships with the characters and with the story, and it was giving me more of a goodbye than I really needed. And it really hurt the film in the end. All in all, I thought this film was charming, I thought it was lovely, and I really enjoyed it, and I really enjoyed watching the creatures and getting to know these characters, and I'm looking forward to seeing them in other films. However, it wasn't perfect, it had its flaws, and I'm rating it as a 7. So, did you watch Fantastic Beasts? Are you a big Potterhead? Do you want a Niffler of your own? But you can't have one because it's mine. Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and always tell me what other films you would like me to review for you next. See ya!